Here, I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 42 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Before we begin, I'd ask all in-person participants to read guidelines written on the updated cards on the table in front of you. They are measures in place to prevent audio feedback incidents and protect the health and safety of all participants, especially our interpreters. You'll notice there's a QR code on the card. It links to a short awareness video. Pursuant to the routine motion adopted by the committee, I can confirm that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting if they're joining us online. Please wait until I recognize you by name before you speak. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Before I go any further, I think I recognize we have a birthday among us today. Mr. Waugh? Is it 30 again?
I wished.
That's why you were there.
Yeah.
Bravo. Happy birthday, sir. Yeah. I'm next week, so we're all Gemini, I guess. All right, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, we're meeting today for our fourth meeting and final meeting regarding our study on the state of creative and performance spaces across Canada. We have with us today Antitube, Ariane Caron-Lachance, Directrice Générale Cinéma Beaumont par vidéoconférence. We have Ballet Vancouver, Joshua Beamish is here with us in the room. Welcome, sir. Conseil québécois du théâtre, Caroline Gignac et Rachel Billet sont ici avec nous.
They're here with us. I think they're here in the room. Good morning.
De musique.
The École de musique Alain Caron. We have Angel Blanco, Master of Music Performance. He's here with us in the room as well. Hello. And the Federation of French Canadian Culture, we have Nancy Junot and Lawrence Zubik, who are here in the room as well. Hello. And online.
La Rivière is here with us as well in the room. Each of you or your organization will have 5 minutes for an opening statement, and then we will turn to questions from members. I will advise you that we are expecting another vote in the House of Commons in the next hour or so, so we will likely have to take a break from this committee and come back. If we have unanimous consent from members, we can go a little bit past 1 o'clock if everybody's available, and I'll canvass members closer to the time to see if everybody's willing to do that. But we'll start here in the room with Antitube, Ariane Caron. Oh, no, so en ligne, excusez-moi.
Online, excuse me, on video conference. There you are. You have the floor for 5 minutes now. Great. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Ariane Caron-Lachance. I told me to speak slowly because I didn't send notes to the interpreter, so I'll take my time. I'm the executive director of Cinéma Beaumont, a small independent cinema in Quebec City, and also the Spira Cooperative, which is for local filmmakers. And we're a distributor, and we have equipment and post-production facilities. These are two organizations in Quebec City that have existed for 30 and 50 years. And so independent cinema exists, there's creation, there's support for artists, and it takes them from the beginning to the very end of the process. The cooperative is the only one for distribution in Quebec City, so it's essential for independent cinema in this area. These two organizations are part of Méduse, which is also a cooperative. It can be a bit confusing at times, but Méduse is a building with 11 artistic organizations in one place. Its site is for each of those organizations, and there's affordable rent. It was built in 1995 so that artistic centers could continue to exist in downtown Quebec City. So I'll speak now about a first issue for us. One of the main issues we're facing is the upkeep of our buildings. The Méduse Co-op has those 11 artistic centers in Quebec, and the building was built 30 years ago and hasn't been maintained much over the years for different reasons. Managing the building went to the different artistic centers and were versatile people with a great deal of capacity for learning, but keeping up real estate is not necessarily part of the skills of artistic directors. So there's no acquisition fund, and there would need to be major investments so it can continue to exist. And we're at a time when funds for real estate have been frozen in large part, and that could be essential for the future. If Quebec City lost a building like this, which was the place for most artistic activity, that would be consequential. And then one of the main sources of funds that would allow us to keep up the equipment inside the building, the Canada Council for the Arts Equipment Fund, was withdrawn last year. So since then, we no longer have access to acquiring equipment. And then I can comment on my area, independent cinema and audiovisual. Personally, for about 10 years, I've been working in public cinema in Montreal, Cinéma Moderne, Cinéma Beaumont, and others. It'd be good to recognize the importance of these small cinemas who show different things than commercial cinemas, which is also important, but it's complementary. The work we do is mainly to develop audiences, and often we don't get as many funds as more commercial operations. And when we're really about artists and helping with production, we focus on showing these films, and there aren't many funds for that. And so we can really attract a lot of people, young people. We get 20 to 30,000 people a year, and 50% are young people. In Canada, we talk about having a hard time reaching young people, and so it'd be good to look at the work that these small cinemas are doing. This is a reality that's specific to Quebec. In the rest of Canada, there might be fewer small independent cinemas, but in Quebec, there's been a boom since 2018. There are 5 new ones who've opened, and something's happening there, so it's important to keep an eye on it. And in the report that the group on the future of audiovisual production submitted last year, there's something that was named very clearly in the conclusions. We've lost the connection with young people for culture. The platforms have taken their attention, especially in the audiovisual realm. So I think there'd be a lot of potential with small and mid-sized spaces. We could have spaces where culture is discovered. These are usually groups that are very rooted in their communities, very flexible. These are great places to have pilot projects. You can look at the impact and expand the project if they're a success. In recent years, the funds we've received were especially to pay for consultants who often produce reports that are put on the shelf later because we don't have the funds to implement them. I think it would be a good time to trust the expertise of the teams that exist and fund labor to put in place these types of projects. Thank you. I'm out of time? Yes. But if you have a few words to add, it's not a problem, but it's been 6 minutes. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. All right. I'm sure there will be questions.
Joshua Beamish from Ballet Vancouver. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Hello, Madam Chair and Committee. I am Joshua Beamish, the Artistic Director of Ballet Vancouver. I offer additional insight as a past member of the City of Vancouver's Arts and Culture Advisory Committee with a sub-focus on spaces. Ballet Vancouver, the new operating name of Movement Dance Production Society, is mandated to revitalize our city's access to professional classical ballet. We operate with gratitude on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Emerging from the pandemic, our organization has seen remarkable growth. From 2023 to 2025, our per-performance attendance rose by 50%. This season, our transition to Ballet Vancouver prompted another 50% increase. In just 1 year, our individual donations have risen by 1,600%. By April, our organization's 2026 year-to-date actuals had doubled our entire 2025 operating budget. With half the year still remaining, our 2026 actuals are expected to quadruple those of 2025. Budgetary jumps of this magnitude are extremely rare. These figures illustrate an objective reality. Our public wants access to professional ballet. They are readily engaging as donors, subscribers, single ticket buyers, and outreach participants. This is a homegrown Canadian success story driven by the celebration of our nation's cultural sovereignty. Our performances are self-presented at Vancouver Civic Theatres through rental grants to offset occupancy. At first glance, our 2026 grant suggests an encouraging 107% increase. However, our venue usage increased by 275%. This paints a troubling picture of the Canadian cultural ecosystem. The Theatre Rental Grants program was not given a budget increase for 2026, and our growth could not be accommodated at a viable level. Our 2025 subsidy rate was 57%. Despite community enthusiasm, this subsidy is now just 33%. This has upset the sustainability of our presentation model. Given limited theatre availability and rising presentation costs, we are challenged to add performances. At our current pace, we will outgrow the 668 seats of Vancouver Playhouse within just 2 seasons. With no 1,000-seat venue for dance, we are faced with cutting performances to expand to a 2,700-seat space. Our audience, conditioned to the increased date flexibility and intimacy of a smaller theatre, would have fewer options to attend our work in a venue 4 times the size. To address this, Ballet Vancouver has joined the Cultural Precinct Planning Committee. Under the leadership of Suzanne Anton, the former Attorney General of BC, this coalition joins over 30 organizations across dance, opera, music, and theatre. Combining new builds with renovations to existing structures, the committee envisions a 4-venue complex encompassing discipline-specific halls at 400, 900, 1,750, and 2,000 seats. The need is urgent and significant. Between 2001 and 2030, Vancouver's population will rise by 67%, with residents spending more on performing arts than national averages. Vancouver's last new major performance venue was built in 1997. 3 decades have passed. With venues at capacity, arts groups cannot secure the dates they need to program effectively. While Ballet Vancouver's example of rapid organizational growth is unusual, sector-wide artistic limitations also present a compelling case for reimagining the city's cultural landscape. Vancouver must move beyond a generic approach to outfitting presentation venues. Increased fly space and backstage area would enable the programming of larger-scale work with greater production value. Similar to London's South Bank or Montreal's Place des Arts, community amenities such as restaurants and cafes would further activate public interest and contribute revenue. Action is overdue. Canadian Heritage has an opportunity to react to the pulse of public enthusiasm and recognize circumstances of extraordinary growth. Infrastructure support is vital, but what is the purpose of investing in venues if organizations cannot afford to use them? This vision will be inconsequential if affordable rental access is not simultaneously considered and addressed. To secure and celebrate our cultural autonomy, there must be responsive, agile support for the unprecedented. Thank you.
Thank you. Ensuite, je passe la parole au Conseil.
Now I give the floor To the Quebec Council on Theatre, Caroline Gignac and Rachel Billet, you have 5 minutes together. Thank you, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. Thank you for giving the Conseil québécois du théâtre this opportunity to contribute to your study. My organization represents professional theatre practitioners and organizations in Quebec. We represent 310 members who are individuals, corporations, and associations encompassing more than 2,000 people. Today I'm joined by a member of our association, Rachel Billet of Théâtre Associé, who speaks on behalf of theatre institutions and advocates for performance venues among its peers in Quebec across all disciplines of the performing arts. The issue of the state of creative and performance spaces in Canada, as well as their role in supporting the next generation of artists, is essential. Theatre institutions and specialized theatre presenters are much more than just performance venues. They are spaces to welcome people and to connect with them for artists and the public. In 2024, it is estimated that there were approximately 4,588 theatrical performances in Quebec, attracting 1.2 million audience members and generating $35.1 million in box office revenue. They serve as true incubators for the entire theatrical ecosystem. Yet the vitality of these spaces is under threat, as it depends directly on the health of the creative forces that inhabit them. That is why, before designing the future of our infrastructure, we must understand the reality facing Quebec's theatre community, and this context is under intense pressure. So for the research and production, the most devastating effects are at the root of our system with artists. There's a lack of a safety net, and there's unacceptable precarity. In Montreal, the average annual income for an artist is around $17,400 per year. We saw just how fragile our ecosystem is during the recent crisis in the cultural sector, where the entire chain was shaken. Unfortunately, underfunding continues to be felt today. Last week, another show from the upcoming season of Théâtre d'Aujourd'hui was cancelled due to a lack of financial resources. Creative and performance spaces are also bearing the brunt of this fragility as they face ever-increasing financial pressure. In fact, between 2017 and 2024, venue-related costs skyrocketed by 53%, while overall inflation stood at around 20%. We're talking about the operating costs of performance venues, as well as maintenance and asset upkeep. This data is at the heart of the report, Our Vulnerable Stages Are Threatened Performing Arts, initiated by Théâtre Associé and co-signed by 34 performance venues in Quebec, including SAT and the UDA, who spoke to you recently. It highlights the urgency of addressing the rise in operating and maintenance costs for performance venues, which exceeds inflation. Asset maintenance costs are added to operating expenses and have an unpredictable component. Planning and financing a major renovation project are complex and time-consuming. Performance venues are forced to carry out emergency repairs using their own resources, which threatens their financial stability. They must adapt to meet universal accessibility needs, address the impacts of climate change, and comply with safety and inclusion requirements. Without predictable funding, they will be unable to modernize their infrastructure to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow. In short, performing arts venues must prioritize the maintenance of their infrastructure to safely welcome artists and audiences at the expense of the very core of their mission, presenting a program of performances to the public. The sharp rise in venue-related costs lies at the heart of the vicious cycle that forces them to operate with severe artistic and staff cuts. How can we improve artists' working conditions and increase resources for access to the arts in this context of constant pressure? This question raises the crucial issue of intergenerational equity. As a passing of the torch takes place in our community, new voices are emerging with a renewed vision of creation. How can we enable this next generation to flourish and become a lasting part of our ecosystem? The question is not merely where the artists of tomorrow will create, it is how they will be able to become and remain artists. We must reflect on how creative and performance institutions can support project-based companies and emerging artists. In our view, creative and performance spaces must be conceived of as living infrastructure serving an ecosystem. To achieve this, 3 recommendations are essential: strengthening the social safety net, increased funding for the Canada Council for the Arts, and an equitable regional approach in all cultural funding and within the Building Community Strong Fund. To effectively support the next generation of artists and promote our culture, we must shift our paradigm. Creative spaces are not merely places to be preserved, but strategic levers for a strong, resilient, and sustainable artistic ecosystem. Thank you.
Si. Ensuite, je
Thank
passe à
you. Next,
Musique Alain
the
Caron.
École de Musique Alain Caron, the School of Music. We have Angel Blanco, Master of Music Performance.
You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable members of the committee. I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's a great honor for me to be here. I appear today both as an independent recording artist and by choice in representation of the École de Musique Alain Caron, located in Rivière-du-Loup. I speak from a concrete reality, that of artists working outside major urban centers, where talent exists but opportunities remain uneven. I also appear as an international recording artist who has carried Canada's name abroad while maintaining a living connection to my Mexican and American heritage. From this experience, I have learned that culture is not a decorative element, but the living infrastructure of a country. The central challenge we face is not the absence of culture, but the lack of connection between cultures. In Canada, Indigenous musical traditions remain significantly underrepresented in formal educational and institutional contexts, despite being a vital and living part of our collective identity. Across the Americas, these traditions are not only the heritage of long-gone civilizations such as the Inca and Mexica empires, where musical systems were highly developed and formally cultivated, but also living systems of knowledge that continue to evolve and inform the present. At the same time, the continent's musical history is more interconnected than is commonly thought. This includes early forms of transmission and intercultural contact in the 17th century, such as those associated with the Mi'kmaq communities and Grand Chief Membertu. These histories invite us not to simplify the past, but to deepen our understanding of it. Internationally, we can already see models of integration between tradition and innovation. Countries such as Burkina Faso have developed cultural policies that actively embed local traditions into education, contemporary creation, and national identity, showing that tradition and modernity are not opposites, but deeply interdependent. This principle is also reflected in technological innovation in music education. In the United Kingdom, tools such as Soundbeam and the BBC Microbit demonstrate how music can become accessible, inclusive, and creatively empowering from an early age, including for persons with disabilities. These innovations echo earlier visionary works such as the Omniphone, an early didactic synthesizer system created in 1960 by my compatriot Raúl Pavón Serrelang, which anticipated the idea of music technology as an educational and creative tool. Technology does not replace art, it amplifies it. Canada must continue to develop and support similar initiatives. However, innovation is not only technological, it is also conceptual. In this sense, there is a historic opportunity in the development of microtonal music. From the 13 sound system of Julian Carrillo to the natural system of music of Augusto Novarro to the works of Canadian composer Bruce Mather, a coherent field of sonic exploration emerges that extends beyond experimentation into a genuine line of musical thought. This body of work should not be treated as an isolated curiosity, but as a meaningful contribution to contemporary music language, with clear implications for education, research, and artistic creation. We are seeing today a growing presence of this language within Quebec's contemporary music scene. In this regard, microtonal music offers an opportunity to expand curricula, diversify pedagogical tools, and deepen the understanding of sound within our institutions, particularly in Quebec, where interest in these practices already exists. Finally, as a union member of the American Federation of Musicians, spanning Canada and the United States, I see firsthand how collective organization strengthens cultural ecosystems. Broader cooperation is not abstract, it's structural. Chair, the next generation of artists does not only need spaces, it needs a connected system. If we align institutions, knowledge, technologies, and territories, Canada will not only preserve cultural diversity, it will build a living, integrated cultural ecosystem. Because a strong society is not sustained by the economy alone, it is also sustained by science, art, sport, and philosophy, essential pillars of human formation and collective progress. Thank you for your attention.
Here, here. Ensuite, je donne la parole
Now
à
I give the floor to the French Canadian Cultural Federation. We have Nancy Juno here with us in the room and Laurence Dubuc, who is joining us by video conference. You have 5 minutes together. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I'm pleased to be here. And to begin, I'd like to say that my association echoes or shares a lot of the issues and solutions proposed by my colleagues at the table today. For nearly 50 years, my association has served as the voice of the arts and cultural sector in French Canadian and Acadian communities. Our network comprises 22 national, provincial, and territorial organizations who are active in their communities. Through them, we represent an ecosystem of approximately 350 organizations. We are here today to discuss more specifically the state of cultural infrastructure in the arts and cultural sector of Canada's Francophone minority communities. We use the term cultural infrastructure in a broad sense to include the physical conditions essential for experimentation, production, training, and rehearsals, as well as for the dissemination of works and artists across the region. In our Francophone minority communities, cultural infrastructure plays an essential role in identity building and social cohesion, as it often represents the only access points to cultural offerings in French. It also supports a vibrant economy and contributes to the attractiveness and retention of Francophone and Francophile populations from diverse backgrounds within the region. However, recent changes to the Canada Cultural Spaces Fund, the CCSF, managed by Canadian Heritage, are raising legitimate concerns about the federal government's capacity and commitment to addressing the specific needs of our communities regarding cultural infrastructure. The CCSF budget, which until now funded a wide range of cultural infrastructure projects, has been reduced and reoriented in the latest federal budget. Over the next 2 fiscal years, the fund will only go to the acquisition of specialized equipment. Other infrastructure needs will be directed to the new Build Communities Strong Fund. The BCSF fund managed... Excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you.
now ringing for a vote. We are just around the corner from the chamber. I would need unanimous consent from members to continue for another 10 minutes or so. Mr. Champoux?
On est pour quelqu'un qui marche très
For
lentement.
somebody who walks very slowly, we're 30 seconds away from the House of Commons. Madam Chair, I think we can easily have an extra 20 minutes if everybody agrees. All
Yes.
right, another 20 minutes. Okay. All right, you can resume. You have another 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Unlike the fund I just mentioned, the BCSF, the new fund, is not a program exclusively dedicated to cultural infrastructure. Since no minimum funding is set aside for our sector within this new program, there is real fear of underfunding for cultural infrastructure across the country, especially since demand for the CCSF has traditionally exceeded its resources for several years. For these reasons, our organization makes 3 recommendations. First, set aside a portion of the BCSF funding for cultural infrastructure, so a carve-out. Second, and in accordance with the spirit of Part 7 of the Official Languages Act, set aside funds for the cultural infrastructure of the Canadian Francophonie and the Acadian community. This infrastructure faces challenges specific to a context often marked by being far from big cities, small community sizes, higher project implementation costs, and limited access to certain technical skills and resources. Within this dedicated fund, eligibility criteria and eligible program expenditures should be applied flexibly. Federal institutions must recognize the asymmetrical nature of the realities and characteristics of minority communities, both among themselves and in relation to majority communities, in order to take positive measures that will enable the implementation of the Government of Canada's commitments regarding official languages. This leads me to my third recommendation, that the federal government fund, through the means it deems most appropriate, research activities to collect reliable and regularly updated data on cultural infrastructure in all provinces and territories, as well as across all artistic disciplines whose needs may be distinct. As stipulated in subsection 41(9) of the Official Languages Act, federal institutions must, to the extent possible, base their positive measures on analysis derived from research and evidence. However, at present, this picture remains incomplete and does not support fully informed decision-making. Thank you for your time. We are now ready to answer your questions regarding cultural infrastructure or any other topic relevant to your study. Thank you. Thank you.
Finalement, David Larivière.
Finally, David Larivière.
Floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I am the artistic director of Paved Arts, an acronym for photography, audio, video, electronic, and digital, an artist-run media arts center located on Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon. We serve a local community of artists, writers, curators, and interested publics, but the greater question of our purpose requires some unpacking. At the level of community, on a grassroots register, we work to democratize and demystify various media as tools of artistic expression. Democratizing gives access, demystifying gives permission. We democratize by wearing down barriers of access. Unlike a commercial model that must prioritize a profitable return on investment, we receive public funding that enables us to subsidize the equipment and facilities that we offer, making them as open and available to our community as possible. Paved Arts brings artists from across the country to stage exhibitions and deliver educational workshops, which we offer free to our members. We keep membership rates low and waive fees where cost is a barrier. As with many artist-run centers in Canada, Paved Arts proactively involves marginalized and equity-seeking artists, and we advocate for decolonization undertaken in good faith. We demystify by placing the tools of production into the hands of people. What dominates artistic expression as delivered in cineplexes or on television is largely shaped by market-driven imperatives, opaque by nature, and at its limit, focus group determined. More fundamentally, the culture industry as such presupposes an anonymous consumer. There is no living relation between Hollywood and the local community. By profound contrast, when a member in our community picks up a video camera for the first time, the effect is instantaneous. The physical engagement with the tools of production is itself a motor for ideas. Consequently, we discover our voice in the act of making. By engaging our programs, artists gain insight into the construction of media and begin to grapple with its implications. The issue is not simply access to equipment, but the difference made when an artist retains full creative control of their expression. Surely we are all familiar with the studies on the economic impact of the arts and the outsized value of each dollar invested in this sector. Such reckoning is persuasive and speaks the language of economists, politicians, and many constituents. And yet the real value of creative and performance spaces across Canada is not always so tangible. These spaces serve the social and civic health of our communities. For example, a recent Hills Strategies report funded by the Canada Council, Canadian Heritage, and the Ontario Arts Council found strong statistical connections between arts participation and public health. This is not to suggest that art is medicine. It is to say that people need more than passive consumption. People need spaces to gather, learn, experiment, and speak back to the images and sounds that shape public life. We protect creative and performance spaces because communities need the capacity to produce something strange and peculiar, something idiosyncratic, something that comes from this artist, in this place, at this time. Along 20th Street in Saskatoon, on Treaty 6 territory, this kind of singular artist-controlled work is being made every day. The people who keep these spaces running do so on goodwill, passion, and chronically insufficient wages. The sector functions because of an enormous devotion that can never be fully honored by public investment. Imagine what becomes possible when organizations plan across years rather than scramble through grant cycles, retain experienced staff, deepen community relationships, and speak back to the social challenges of our time. In a period of accelerating commercial enclosure of culture, where algorithms too often determine what gets seen, the capacity to produce something independent, artist-controlled, and expressive of community is not ornamental. It may be exactly what holds us together. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now turn the floor over to Monsieur Bernard Généreux pour 6 minutes. Vous avez la parole maintenant.
The floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all our witnesses for your very interesting presentations. I think we have a wonderful panel of representatives from all types of fields around Canada. I have 6 minutes, so I'll ask you to be very brief as much as possible. Angel, you talked about the fact that technology does not replace art, but can amplify it. Does it also mean that AI, as we currently see it in our creative spaces, is part of that technology that you describe?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, it could be part of it, but the idea is that it shouldn't replace it. Actually, it will never replace it because there's a part that, as a performer, you need yourself to perform. So it could be a tool, and I really welcome if we could use it more. But always keeping in mind that it's for assisting the creation of the artist in the educational background.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Mr. Blanco, can you stay a little bit further back from the microphone? It's just the interpreters have very sensitive, so it's difficulties. So just to keep that in mind.
This? Okay.
Speak slowly away from the microphone,
Right.
and everyone
Okay.
will be safe. Thank you.
Prochaine question, est-ce que...
My next question. Do you think that technology in a music school such as the one where you work is used more today than it was in the past? Do you see a difference today? I hear, and when I say technology here, I also include AI.
I wouldn't say AI per se that is used right now at the École de Musique à Caron, but for sure we use the Soundbeam. We adopted the Soundbeam, and the Soundbeam is a common tool in England, which is an instrument special for composer, but at the same time is really, really special for people with disabilities because it is such as like the old theremin. It's an instrument that you don't touch just by moving your body and you create harmonies, melodies, etc., etc. So I will say that yes, we are the champions of Soundbeam right now, at least in as far as I know, in the province of Quebec and maybe Ontario, because I haven't heard that much from Soundbeam in Canada. So yes, indeed, we use it.
Vous avez aussi dit quelque chose d'intéressant.
You also said something interesting or fundamental in your opening remarks. You said, where will future artists create? This goes beyond the question of space. For instance, Mr. Blanco says talked about offering them a space, but when we talk about a creative space, this brings us to a fundamental question. Beyond the physical spaces, there's the space that the arts take in Canada in terms of representation, where we want to go as a nation, as creators. It's a question that goes much beyond the physical space. So I'd like to ask our panel, what are some solutions or various elements that the Canadian government, as we are here today on behalf of the Canadian government, how can we help the arts industry do more? Thank you for the question. I think that our message for today was to invite you to think more strategically and more in depth about these questions, to see beyond the actual buildings. What we are talking about today is to invite you to think about how creative and performance space play an important role for emerging artists, for the next generation. So our recommendation for the government would be to support us and to come with us along this reflection that would bring about a change of paradigm. These spaces for theater, it's not only somewhere for an audience member to sit. We're talking about welcoming them. We're talking about having a relationship with them. So I do think that the work that this committee is doing right now is relevant, but should consider this aspect of the question. It should be in your report, and it should be in the questions you ask yourself. This week, I went to see an amateur theater play in La Pocatière, put on by people I know very well. I brought my granddaughter, who's 12, who wants to be an actress. I mean, she doesn't get that from me, that's for sure. I'm wondering, being able to bring our young people towards these spaces, could that be a way of bringing more hope to performers, to creators? I mean, we were all old men there. I mean, she was the only young person there. I think we should encourage young people to go in these spaces, and we should consider that. I know that Quebec does it. Could the federal government be more involved on this level? Yes, but I would like to bring up various topics that were brought up by witnesses. This is the difficult reality of the people that manage these spaces. They're trying to patch holes in the roof. They're trying to balance impossible budgets. So, of course, having a link to young people, having a relationship with our public is essential, but how do we make time for it when managers or any creative worker is having to deal with structural challenges? Well, would you say that there's a disparity between big organizations that are very well funded and smaller organizations? Do you feel much of a disparity in how public funds are allocated right now? Where I see the biggest disparity is between time invested in the mission, which is to welcome artists, to bring them in, to present, to have a relationship with the public, and the difference between the actual management. We can make magic happen, but there are limits to that. Well, earlier, Ms. Caron Lachance talked about money used, that there's money for reports and analysis, but no money for projects once the reports are published. Do you think there's too much red tape or bureaucracy here? You've reached 7 minutes, so we would ask for a quick answer, please. Well, in conclusion, I would say that it's not so much bureaucracy, but rather the time given to professionals in this field to allow them to fully work on their mission. Thank you. I do think we have time for one more member, one more question. We have 13 minutes, so Mr. El Soud for 6 minutes, and then we'll come back to Mr. Champoux.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. Bon matin, tout le monde. Thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. You know, a few months ago now, I was in Vancouver, and while I was there, I made a point of visiting an organization called Arts Umbrella. They do phenomenal work ensuring young people, regardless of circumstances, have access to a high-quality arts education. They do a bit of everything in the arts, that is theater, music, film, dance. And I mention them because we've heard this in almost all of your opening remarks today, this importance of not just creating spaces, but of creating a system. Mr. Beamish, you know this well. Your career in dance has taken you across Canada and around the world, working in both contemporary and classical ballet. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to expand on something you said in your opening remarks. How can Canada better support its dance sector so that artists can build strong careers at home while still remaining competitive on the global stage?
Yeah, I think we're in this very clear moment of cultural sovereignty where we're trying to advocate for keeping Canadian talent at home. For us with Ballet Vancouver, this is a primary part of our mandate. I'm a Canadian, and as the leader of the organization, I value having Canadian performers representing Canadian choreographers, designers, composers across mediums within our work. I think one thing that's challenging, economically, if you go to Europe as a young dancer, you get a 13-month contract with, you're a government employee in some of these places. We don't have systems in place, and I don't believe that we will. I don't see that coming in the future. But that is a big challenge in terms of retaining top-level talent, for sure. And then ultimately, we have this system of operating companies and project companies. In this case, we are still a project company in our funding at all levels of government. And so we don't have guaranteed funding every year where we can make long-range planning to ensure year-round contracts for dance artists. So I feel personally that there has been a big push towards supporting emerging. And many of us who were emerging at that time did not receive that support. And so what's happened is that the people in this kind of mid-level, mid-career, mid-life organization state didn't receive the support as emerging that emerging receives now. And then that funding is being rededicated to emerging. So it is a challenge for mid-level organizations, I believe. I do believe it's important to support emerging artists. I also think organizations are well equipped as well to provide support for emerging artists if they're given support to have a sustainable structure. And that's something that I do advocate for, is health of organizations versus giving a lot of money out to young people making things for the first time. I think that will give people like myself more confidence in feeling that they should stay in Canada and that Canada will invest in them to have longevity. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Fantastic. Madame Billet, Madame Gignac,
Ms. Billet-Gignac, you represent a big group of organizations and various theaters around Quebec. You said it in your opening remark. The question is not just where, but how. How can we ensure that the next generation of theater workers are prepared for what's to come? It's a very general question. Well, I think I would go back to my answers to Mr. Généreux. If we want to offer a long-lasting career, we need to take a step back and reconsider the model that's been put in place for the next generation. There's a financial model, a structural model that's from a certain era that was created at a certain point in time. And that's why today we'd like to invite the committee to strategically think about the future and to think a bit bigger. How can we rethink the entire model and infrastructure at various levels? What is the leverage that we can use to give the next generation long-lasting careers? Something that we see a lot today that clearly shows why this model is outdated is that before, companies could have what's called support to mission, which is a recurring cyclical support. When you reach that stage, it's a bit of the holy grail of funding. You know that it's total recognition of your work. But now, with the financial challenges that's facing Canada, this support is no longer open up to new beneficiaries. So that's why we talked about intergenerational support. What are we offering emerging artists? And when I talk about emerging artists, I'm not talking about people who've left school 2 or 3 years ago. I'm talking about artists that have been established for 15 years, award-winning artists who have put in the time. We need to rethink the model that's been implemented and come up with an ecosystem and a structure that allows these artists and these groups to have some predictability, but also be recognized for the expertise that they've been able to develop over the years. Thank you. I only have 15 seconds left, so I'll stop here.
When we come back, I'll give the floor to Mr. Champoux for 6 minutes, and we'll continue. Apologize for the interruption, but we are suspended. Convene this meeting. We are back in session, and I'm passing la parole à Mr. Champoux.
The
Madame
floor
la
goes to Mr. Champoux. Madam Chair, if I may, there's still a lot of movement. Maybe people should have a seat and we can focus. But before I begin, I'd like to talk about the time we'll have to extend the meeting after 1 p.m. There might be issues with people's schedules. So what were you thinking for the time of the meeting? I'm okay to continue. How long do we have?
Yeah. How much time have we? On peut continuer.
We can continue 15 or 20 minutes over. Does that work? Does somebody want to say something? Madam Chair, I have other commitments at 1 p.m. I can't. You can't? No, absolutely not. I don't think my colleague can either. The Liberals, do you have something to say on this?
No, finish. We're talking about what time we should finish because we've lost time due to votes, and so we have resources to continue an extra half an hour after the meeting. We'll see how it goes. Mr. Généreux and Mr. Waugh are not in favor of that, but we'll see how it goes. Is that
Ça prend
sufficient?
pas le consentement unanime pour continuer?
Don't we need
Non?
unanimous consent to continue? No? Okay, just quorum. Okay, great. All right, thank you. Is everyone there? Is everybody ready?
Allez-y, Mr. Champoux.
Go ahead,
Yep.
Mr. Champoux. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you once again to the witnesses for joining us today. I'll turn to Ms. Gignac, Ms. Billet, to talk a little bit about infrastructure and upkeep and responsibilities you have to take on for infrastructure and for building upkeep for your theater companies and for producers in general. Ms. Billet with Théâtre Associé, I think you've done a detailed study, a fulsome study on this. I'd like to hear you talk about the general issue, the impact it has on culture, that disengagement of Canadian heritage for funding infrastructure. Thank you very much for the question. Théâtre Associé, the preliminary numbers we have, it's 53% was the rise in costs versus 20% inflation. So concretely, the variable costs are being cut, and that's artists and creation. There's 20% less creation. So there's a reduction for that. And so it's essential to better fund infrastructure so we can allow venues to fulfill their mission with the business model. For it's a low dependence on public funds. For venues with over 800 spots, it's 15% public funds. Otherwise, it's ticket sales and private funding. Ms. Juneau talked about the Canada Cultural Spaces Fund and the change to it. In arts and culture, we've seen the Build Communities Strong Fund as an opportunity because she mentioned that there are few resources there. So we saw an opportunity to have better support for infrastructure, but now we're very concerned. So arts and culture needs a minimum quota of funding, and then we need to have regional fairness because all of the provinces are not the same. Some don't have funding for infrastructure. So there could be a benefit from that fund, regardless of where we're located in the provinces, or if it's in a remote location. And when a theater is renovated, there needs to be specific expertise. And so to work in front of an audience, there needs to be cultural expertise. And then our role today as witnesses is not just to present a list of problems, but also solutions. And what we see, in addition to the funding needed for cultural infrastructure, there are things we can put in place that aren't expensive that can really make a difference. For example, offering predictable multi-year funding for infrastructure. There's all the costs associated with real estate specialists who prepare that upkeep and have it be indexed. And we really believe in maintaining real estate. Currently, we wouldn't be acquiring more real estate, but really maintaining what we have and improving them. And we need to note the importance of prioritizing accessibility, climate resilience, and heritage conservation. These need to be priorities in funding cultural infrastructure, and the importance of having approaches that are really focused and combine the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. We're talking about funding. Do you have the impression that the government understands the investment from your members? That portion, it takes expertise. It's not always easy to find. The time you have to devote to doing other things than artistic creation. Do you have the impression that when you talk to the government, it understands your reality? You're talking about having funds dedicated for culture because the expertise is different than in other areas. Do you understand? Do you feel that you're understood? Well, I have the impression that, yes, I think the issue is not just funding, but it's also the way things are done. I'm taking an example from Quebec. The major issue we have is there's a lack of predictability. For example, just to find professionals for audiovisual equipment to plan work in the next 5, 10, 15 years. When we look at housing cooperatives, it's a common practice, and for nonprofits as well. Governments are very sensitive. They understand we have the same issue of a lack of predictability, and then what solution can be found to provide that predictability. Maybe things could be changed there. When you see that the government moves from Canadian Heritage to a new fund, the amounts that are for the upkeep of infrastructure, what do you think of that? Do you have to restart advocating for your arguments? Do you find it discouraging to climb that hill every time? There's been a lot of uncertainty with that change, that reorientation. Canadian Heritage sent more clarity around that transition finally, but there's a palpable concern. In Quebec, the funding we receive, there are specific dates, and it's really a puzzle to arrange the funding with the two levels of government, the provincial and federal level. In just a few seconds, I want to talk about funding because that's at the heart of things. In culture, we need more funding in a number of areas, but we've seen small increases in most areas, but it doesn't help the performing arts like dance and others. The Canada Council for the Arts said it needed $140 million for its budget, but was given $6 million last fall in the budget. What is your view of that? How do you organize yourselves? Well, at the beginning, we mobilized to ensure there wouldn't be backsliding from Canada Council of the Arts because the fear was that there would be cuts. That was a message in the budget. And of course, it's not what we were hoping for. And it doesn't meet the challenges. The $140 million was a threshold for the investments that were made during the pandemic. And the numbers we have show that the challenges caused by the pandemic there are financial challenges that have percolated beyond the pandemic. So that was our perspective with the $140 million to ensure a continuity of support after the pandemic. Would you say that culture is still underfunded by the federal government? Yes. And I looked over 20 years, the amount of money given in contributions from the Canada Council from the Arts to artists. And when we look, it's a gap of about $140 million. So the demand is really legitimate. We're trying to catch up when the budget wasn't indexed to inflation. Thank you. Thank you for giving us numbers here today. Thank you for your expertise you've developed. It's much appreciated. Very valuable for us. Thank you.
Next, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Garnet Genius, who joins us online. Welcome to Heritage Committee, sir. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's great to be back at the Heritage Committee. On February 28th, I was here and we heard testimony, explosive testimony about foreign interference by the CCP involved in the arts sector. At the time, I moved a motion to condemn that interference, a motion that I felt was pretty simple and straightforward and could have been quickly adopted without interfering with witness time. At that time, the parliamentary secretary, Mr. Miles, moved to adjourn debate on that. He said that it was necessary from the government's perspective for them to have more time to review that motion. I had suggested at the time that we set aside some time for consideration of that motion. I understand time hasn't been set aside so far, and it's been 12 days since that motion was moved. So I think the government and other members have certainly seen this motion, had time to look at it, and I think we can and should deal with it quickly. This is a very serious issue of foreign state interference, trying to intimidate artists and undermine the work of the arts community. So with that in mind, Chair, I'd like to move that we resume consideration of the motion that I moved on May 28th. Thank you.
Thank you. Given that this committee has had proper notice of that motion, I will declare that it is in order and I will entertain hands from the floor. I have Mr. Diot and Ms. Cronus for now. Mr. Diot.
Well, thanks, colleague, for moving that. I mean, the one thing about the arts community is you've got to have audiences there to watch it, and this the very fact that these artists were having a hard time to even perform their art is just a travesty. And I do think that that this is absolutely essential that we call this kind of thing out. It is just as I say, it's just a travesty. And I would think that it takes precedence over many of the other things that we concern ourselves with when artists simply cannot have an audience, when there have been things like bomb threats and so forth that and it's from a foreign entity, which is absolutely ridiculous in my view. So I hope that we can roundly and soundly condemn this.
Thank you, Mr. Diot. I erred in opening the floor to comments because it is a dilatory motion, in fact, to resume debate on that topic. And so I will turn to the clerk to call the vote.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just a point of order. I do know that a resumption motion is a dilatory motion. However, there was no objection to it. So my understanding was that it was adopted unanimously. So you didn't err in allowing the motion to be adopted since there was no objection. Nobody requested a recorded vote. So I would think we're now currently debating that motion.
No, I think we're going to call the vote on that motion.
But Mr. Diot spoke, so.
Mr. Genius.
In favor.
Mrs. Cronis,
In favor.
Mr. Dieppe,
In favor?
Mr. Albus,
In favor.
Monsieur Champoux, Monsieur Al-Soud, Madame Auguste,
No.
Mrs. Ertel,
No.
Mr. Miles,
No.
Ntumba,
No.
Royer.
No.
Six against, defeated.
So that motion was defeated. Mr. Jenius, you still have the floor for questions for another 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, that was disappointing and a circus. And since we're at the Heritage Committee, I should clarify, I mean a circus in the bad sense, not in the good sense. This was a motion that government members have seen before. It's been before this committee for 12 days, and it simply condemns foreign interference by the CCP in the Canadian arts sector. So I'm surprised, I'm disappointed that the government is not allowing this to go forward. 12 days ago, their reason for not allowing it to proceed was that they needed more time to see the motion. So fair enough.
Thank you,
Now they've
Mr.
had 12
Jenius.
days
We have
and they're still
already,
blocking it.
I'm going to interrupt you there because we've already voted to not continue debate on that motion.
Yeah.
So if you don't have any questions for these witnesses, I'll turn the floor
Point of order.
over to
Point of
Ms.
order.
Royer. Go ahead, Mr. Albus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may be new to the committee, but I'm certainly not new to parliamentary time. And the member had, as you said, about 3.5 minutes. It's his time, and he can use it to ask questions of the witnesses, or he could ask questions of the room. I understand when members can be disappointed that they'll want to share some of their feelings with their colleagues. But I don't think you can just simply take away a member's time simply because you disagree with what he has to say.
I take your point. My point is that we've already adjourned debate on that topic, and so I'd like to move on to the topic of the day. Mr. Jenius, do you have
Could you
another
rule on whether or not it's that a member's time is a member's time?
It is a debate, and the procedure at this committee has been to try to stay on topic. And so I'll turn it back to Mr. Jenius. You have another minute. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Chair.
Champoux.
Madame la Présidente, je pense que...
Madam Chair, I think in a certain sense, I'd add some nuance to the decision you just made. I think that, yes, members can use their time in the way they see fit, insofar as they keep to the topic. And what you're saying to Mr. Jenius is that he can't talk about this. I think he can talk about it if he ties it to the topic of the day, which doesn't seem to be the case in how he began to speak. But if he ties it to the topic we are studying now, he does have the right to use his time to speak. Yes, I agree.
Jenius, I'll give you another minute.
Madam Chair, I think my disappointment is clear with how you've handled this process, as well as, frankly, with all the Liberal members in opposing concrete efforts to bring this committee together in condemning foreign interference in our arts sector. I don't really have anything to add to that. I think the public sees and will share my disappointment, and I'll yield the rest of my time to Mr. Diot.
I think your time is effectively up. I'll pass the floor now to Ms. Royer for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to every person appearing here today. Mr. Beamish, in less than 3 years, Ballet Vancouver has made incredible strides in the development of BC's performing arts sector and in the professional ballet, classical ballet space. You have been instrumental in repatriating top Canadian talent back from other countries and some companies such as the American Ballet Theatre, San Francisco's Ballet Company, etc. So my first question is, how important is the repatriation and the retention of professional artists to our cultural sovereignty?
It's of vital importance. We don't have a national culture without the artists of our nation who create the work that creates our Canadian identity. I think it's completely paramount And I think we're in a key moment as a country to reflect on what is it to be a Canadian artist and what is the responsibility of Canadian institutions to be putting Canadian work forth, danced by Canadians.
So how important is the critical cultural infrastructure to this piece to actually be able to retain and repatriate artists?
Quite simply, it comes down to a few things. Top talent dancers, they want to dance great work, they want to perform consistently, and they want to be compensated at international professional standards. So, for example, looking at our organization in a 668 theater, paying these principal dancers could be 1/4 of our entire box office. So at 668 seats, the model is not sustainable. Then we move to 2,700 seats, and we have to cut our performances down to just 2. So then suddenly these dancers are performing 6 shows a year. And then what are we doing with them for the rest of the year, and how are we generating revenue to be able to sustain their salaries? And so we need a space where we could present a week or 2 weeks of shows. Right now at Vancouver Playhouse, it's incredibly challenging for any organization to have more than 1 week. All around the world, you'll see, for example, I was just in Oslo, and Norwegian National Ballet, they're premiering a new Romeo and Juliet now, and then it's going to come back again later in the year. This is not something that we could do. We have a one-shot, one-weekend space to present something. You can't use word of mouth to build on having people come back the next week. There's not venue availability, and we can't afford it. So we're specifically challenged by the limitations of the cultural infrastructure.
Okay. Now, you mentioned in your opening remarks, you said that individual donors were up 1,600%, ticket sales up 50%. You are experiencing exponential growth, and I know that your operating budget will need to quadruple in the next year. So with that growth, how can federal government better support that type of extenuating circumstance?
I think there needs to be agile funding to support extenuating circumstances. There is obviously operating funding at Canada Council for the Arts, but it only comes up every 4 years, I believe, and it was also suspended due to the pandemic. So that program particularly is in a challenging moment, and we won't be able to access it for a number of years. So how do we capitalize upon this momentum? And one of the things that I think could be most helpful for organizations is support for development, support to empower ourselves to raise our own funds. And we're really an example of, we have had around maybe $100,000 in grant support to be able to get to what we've done, maybe 130 over the last year and a half. And we are looking to end this year with a $1.3 million operating budget. And so if we had a development staff member specifically focused on raising funds, it wouldn't be an afterthought on everything else that a lean organization has to do to try to keep raising money, and we wouldn't have to keep coming back to the federal government for everything.
Okay, thank you very much. So my 20 seconds remaining. A quick question for Ms. Juneau. The Build Community Strong Fund, I know that it doesn't necessarily have a carve-out for cultural spaces. Can you speak just a little bit to that? Merci.
Oui, avec plaisir. Merci pour votre question.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you for your question. It's clear that in that huge fund that was created, the cultural and artistic sector would have to compete with infrastructure needs like bridges, whereas we don't represent the same interests in the sense that, yes, a bridge is important, we agree, but the cultural and artistic sector, our venues, our creative spaces are just as important for the health of our nation. So I think by setting aside part of that fund specifically for cultural and artistic infrastructure, the government would ensure that we won't lose out in competition to totally different sectors.
Mr. Champoux, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Champoux, you have 2.5 minutes. 10.5 minutes? No, 2.5 minutes. My French. Your French is perfect. All right, I'd like to talk a little bit about the sad phenomenon we are seeing more and more. The canceling of shows, a reduction in tour length, fewer cities are visited with a tour. You mentioned it earlier, how a show was canceled. It's happening more and more. What is the consequence of that? When it happens, artists and technicians, a whole troupe, have less income. But what are the long-term consequences of that for the cultural sector? I can answer with a clear example, the one we named in our opening remarks, the Théâtre Aujourd'hui in Montreal. The show we referenced was from Camille Giguère-Côté. I'm stating her name because what is the consequence? Well, the small halls are places where artists come with their own financial contribution. It's a co-production where the theater contributes a certain share, but the artist also has to provide funding from the Canada Council from the Arts or the provincial equivalent or the Montreal equivalent. This person received no funding. So when we look at the consequences of the cancellation for that artist from the next generation, it means that potentially this artist would have to take on the whole risk of putting the show on and perhaps go into debt personally. So there are high chances that those artists will not be able to put a new show on in short order. And would it be more fringe artists or emerging artists who would be victims of this type of cancellation, who have to take these sorts of measures, or would it be everyone? No, not at all. It's really about the limits to the amounts that are invested in the arts now. This artist had already been supported earlier. The project had already received funding. The artistic quality had been recognized for the research and creation portion. So now when it's time to put the show on, this is piece by piece funding. So because of budget limits, even though the show was recognized by peers, it was selected by artistic directors, well, the current funding limits don't allow it to be supported. And so the artist herself would have to go into debt to do her work. Committee members, I know few professional careers that require workers to go into personal debt to do their work. Thank you. Mr. Diot.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These questions are for David Riviere from Paved Art. David, I know you had mentioned something along the lines of you attempt to wear down the barriers to access art, and you look for marginalized artists, and that sort of thing. In September of 2025, Paved Art installed a large-scale pro-Palestinian billboard, and it included 35 different pro-Palestinian statements and links to QR codes with more information. My question is this: was the same opportunity offered to the Jewish community to share their statements?
The way that programming happens at Paved Arts is certainly freely open to anybody to apply. We have an annual call for submissions. It's September 15th, and we don't screen anything in terms of like disallowing anyone from applying. That particular work was by Keely Hefner, who did a residency with us and was engaged in, as you say, like that. The work included 35 sentences for Palestine, but it also led to a rigorously researched data website that people could follow up on and verify all of the on the billboard.
Now, if somebody from the Jewish community approached you to do a similar art form, would you have said that is okay?
I can't say yes or no in this moment. We would have to look at the project because that's what we did in the other regard as well. It is actually adjudicated. We put together peer juries.
Right. What's your feeling on that, though? Would you personally approve something like that?
I could see it, in the realm of possibilities. I can't really, without actually looking at the work, I can't comment in any kind of detail. If you're talking about, though, like some kind of sense of balance well, this is said, so that should be said. That isn't really my place or my inclination.
So you wouldn't have balance, or you wouldn't have. That's not in your.
If somebody
bailiwick.
actually applied with work like that, which I have not seen, then it would be considered.
Okay. You did mention that Keely Hefner was the artist in residence, and during her residency, she hosted several pro-Palestinian installations. She actually did an exhibit where she had repaired faded and torn Palestinian flags to be submitted by local residents. Have any artists in residence hosted pro-Jewish installations?
No. Pro-Jewish, no.
Was there any offer to repair
But-
flags of Israel?
Also, no. There's,
Why-
that wasn't Keely's project.
Right.
And two, there's kind of mixed signals coming here when you say pro-Jewish, because Judaism is a religious faith.
Right. Okay. So
you mean the state of
pro-Israeli,
Israel.
Israeli.
Yeah. You mean the state of Israel.
Do you think that Paved Arts is a safe space for Jewish artists and community members?
Absolutely.
How so?
We actually reached out at a certain point, there was a project that occurred at Paved Arts where we reached out to ensure that the Jewish community were invited to a public event and that they should feel safe in the space.
Shouldn't everybody be invited to public events? I mean, why would you have to reach out to the Jewish community and say, oh, you can come here?
This particular event, there were concerns raised by a couple of people in the community, and when those concerns were raised, that's when we reached out to say that you are most welcome to be here.
Do you think
Thank you, Mr. Diat. Your time's up. I'm going to pass the floor over to Mr. Tumba for 5 minutes. I understand you're sharing your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll share my time with Mr. Miles. Canada is rich in diversity. I'm pleased to see our witnesses. Mr. Larivière, I was listening to your responses. I think you've made a lot of effort for your event to be inclusive so everyone could participate. But let's talk about the study before us. We're talking about the state of creative and performance spaces. These spaces are struggling to draw people in because young people aren't going. There could be a bar next door to make it attractive. My question is for everyone. You can answer as you wish. My time is limited, though. What do you think, and what would be your best recommendation for us to change that? Thank you. Well, if I may, institutions are really economic drivers. We welcome people. People use them as meeting places and find meaning. What members tell me, the shows that are the hardest to have people come to are those who ask complex questions about our world, because things are really changing internationally. People really need to experience something as a group So that would be my quick answer. If I may add something, and I'd draw a link with the purpose of the study, cultural infrastructure, artistic infrastructure is all the more important because they create these meeting spaces for people to be together. They've often replaced our churches as gathering places where you feel like you're part of a community, something bigger than yourself. You feel included. So there's the importance of ensuring that our communities have access to these spaces and that we can put on all sorts of activities that speak to all sorts of people. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. I have a question I asked earlier to other witnesses, and I wonder if the definition of cultural spaces and cultural infrastructure in Canada is broad. Is it broad enough? Do we need to broaden it a bit, especially for more experimental spaces? I don't know how it works in the provinces or in Canada, but this study is especially for emerging artists to make it accessible, affordable, so they can experiment with their work. Could we talk a little bit about that? We could begin with Ms. Juneau. Yes. Even in our opening remarks, we spoke about this. In the official language minority communities, often we don't meet the standards for numbers or for the area covered. That would apply better to other communities. So there's the need for any program that supports culture and the arts. It needs to be flexible to take into account the realities of different communities. I'm speaking of ours, but there's all sorts in Quebec or in more remote areas of Canada. It's the same challenge. So often we don't meet the criteria that are set out for places where there's a higher population. So yes, and in our communities, production spaces are often within a community center where other organizations are present as well. They're not as well equipped. We don't always have access to technology or the human resources we need to put on shows that meet specific criteria set out by others. So we need to take that into account. There's a variety. And so the program should have a variety of criteria as well. Thank you. Perhaps, Joshua?
There's a lack of support for residency space to experiment. So, for example, the theater rental grant with Vancouver Civic Theatres predominantly supports the performance days. If you want artists to be experimental and to be able to produce innovative work, we need time in the spaces in which the work is going to be performed in order to feel the full creative vision of what could be possible, and whether this would be support for something like Vancouver Civic Theatres to create a residency program or to offset that, or to create support for other venues in rural or regional areas to have residencies that then activate other communities, and it kind of gets a two birds, one stone situation. Yeah, not that I advocate for violence to animals, but yeah.
Thank you very much.
The time that we have for today. I want to appreciate all of our witnesses for being here and your excellent testimony today. If there's anything you forgot to say or anything you didn't manage to get on the record, please send a letter to our committee via the clerk, and it's information we can consider when our analysts put together our report on this study. This concludes the testimony for this study, so we really appreciate everything that you've brought for us today. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.